So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Hellsing Vampire, so let's start the series. The day Integra Fairbrook Wingate's Hellsing was buried, it rained. In the shadow of a tall monument, a lone figure wearing a long red trench coat and a broad-brimmed fedora stood on a hill and gazed down at the sea of black umbrellas below. Alucard remained still, oblivious to the rain that trickled off the brim of his hat and the hem of his coat. The ancient vampire had witnessed the birth, aging, and death of innumerable humans over the course of more than 6 centuries of unlife. The loss of Integra and the people he allowed himself to care for would always hurt, but it was a harsh reality of his world. Humans perished while monsters roamed the earth until someone put them down. In her 8th decade of life, Integra died surrounded by friends and family, and her grown son and daughter were down among the sea of black umbrellas. Alucard's eyes easily identified them, and they were both strong and intelligent like their mother. At least Integra had not died young, like so many who fought for Hellsing, and the Hellsing organization was stronger than ever. Integra had married and had heirs in the years following the war, and she lived to a ripe old age, with bouncing grandchildren on her knee. Behind the two stood a short, stocky, blonde woman in an orange uniform who had not aged with the years like the other familiar faces around her had. Her beautiful face was expressionless, and her red eyes were hidden behind dark glasses. She held an umbrella over the Hellsings and watched Integra's casket being lowered into the ground. She was as solid as stone, his offspring. Their bond had waned over the years as Seras Victoria left behind that police girl and became a strong, experienced Draculina, but Alucard could sense her grief. She wasn't as accustomed to seeing the humans she loved age and die as he was, but she was strong. Burying Walter hadn't broken her, and neither would saying goodbye to Integra. Alucard felt her gaze rise towards him for a moment, finding him unerringly for all that he was hidden in shadow. The Hellsing organization needed Seras Victoria as a warrior, and he hadn't had to intervene in a battle on her behalf in over 10 years. The soldiers that served Hellsing were more powerful than ever, and Seras was now one of the strongest vampires on the planet. Alucard knew deep down that he was no longer needed, and he had stayed by Integra's side because he loved her as his master, but now that she was gone, he considered going back to sleep because Integra's heirs wouldn't deny him the sleep of ages. He was a relic of the past, and Seras was the future. She was still young for a vampire, and more adaptable than an old monster like him. She was involved in the politics and technology of the modern world in a way that he wasn't. A deep, gruff voice swore behind Alucard, "Bloody hell vampire, why are you standing in the rain?" with a slight pop of displaced air. Without looking back, Alucard replied absently, "We're in England, Puck, it rains here." "I'm aware of that, why are you out in it?" Puck grumbled as he moved up to stand next to Alucard. He was a short, portly man with chestnut-brown skin, and his head barely reached his waist. His brown eyes were intelligent, and he had a long white beard. He was wearing a white suit and slacks, a black shirt, a red tie, and white leather shoes. He was soaked from the rain and seemed unhappy about it. Upon noticing the funeral, Puck nodded. "Someone died?" The dwarf squinted down at the coffin and then back at Alucard. "Ah, that would be the latest of the mortals you've allowed to hold your leash." Alucard's throat growled, "Careful, mage. I mean no disrespect, Alucard, from everything I hear the Hellsings are exemplary mortals. I just don't understand why you still torture yourself this way. I know you care about the descendants of that man who defeated you, but watching them die one after another isn't healthy, even for the king of vampires," said Puck, the first of those who wielded the primal magic of creation, laughing as he held out his hand and a fat, lit cigar appeared out of thin air. Alucard winced at the title, king of vampires. He had never wanted or sought the position, but it was his because he was the oldest and strongest vampire alive on Earth, making him one of the first, the leaders of the various clans of monsters in the world. Taken together, the first were the closest thing to a governing body asserting sovereignty over the things that went bump in the night. In reality, they were little more than a group of powerful people who collaborated to exterminate any supernatural being that crossed the line. If the threat from Millennium had been more than a vampire internal conflict, the first would have intervened. You may be right, Puck, but without pain, how do we know we're still alive? Alucard watched as Seras and Integra's children shoveled the first few spades of dirt into the grave. He didn't care much about being the king of vampires and would gladly cede the throne to someone else if there was an heir waiting in the wings. However, all the vampires older than him were either dead or gone, and none of the younger ones were prepared for the responsibility. Puck raised his eyebrows. That's the masochist in you talking. I get by just fine without punishing myself. I've been thinking about returning to slumber for a while, Alucard said. The Hellsing organization no longer needs me, it's time for a rest. Any other time I'd encourage you to do just that, Alucard. We all need a long vacation from consciousness every once in a while. Unfortunately, something's come up, and we're the only members of the first who are available right now, Puck said solemnly as he observed the gravediggers filling in the hole and the assembled mourners dispersing. There's one more battle that needs to be fought, Puck said, looking up at the vampire. Alucard said, You're awake, Puck, can't you deal with it? He hadn't realized how prepared he was to go back to sleep until he said it out loud. I can't leave the Eternal Road untended. In any case, this is a job for the king of vampires, the dwarf said, shaking his head. What's the problem? Sighed Alucard. The little wizard was prepared for Alucard's explosion, and he wasn't let down. Morphean's prison is crumbling, Puck replied sadly. It's going to fail soon, and then he'll be free to ravage the world we banished him to once more. How? You told me the warriors of that world sealed him away forever. Alucard said, his fangs filling his mouth as his red eyes flared behind his orange-tinted glasses. Puck gave a sigh. They did seal him away, and they tied the seal to the blood of the clan that created the seal. There were dozens of them there when they imprisoned Morphean, and it only takes one remaining alive to hold the seal. They should have had too many descendants to ever lose the bloodline entirely. But we may have underestimated the savagery of their culture. I've been feeling them die in droves over the last 2 decades, and now the last of them are close to death. As he gazed off into the distance, Alucard recalled a time when he had not been a member of the first, when there had been another king of vampires, Morphean. His insanity had almost destroyed the world. Hating humanity, Morphean and his followers had tried to wipe out the entire species, coming dangerously close to doing so before the other first stopped him. Even after they had defeated Morphean and killed his followers, the issue had persisted. No one had been able to kill the original vampire forever. It was only centuries later that the first realized that instead of destroying Morphean, their actions had only sent him to another world connected to the Eternal Road. It could have ended in disaster, but the people of that world had managed to solve the problem of Morphean on their own, using their own particular brand of hereditary magic to trap him in an inescapable prison, at least as long as its linchpins remained alive. At the time, the Eternal Road had been a recently discovered enigma, and Puck and his magely brethren had little knowledge of it, but they had used it out of desperation. Morphean is older than me, Puck, stronger. I don't know that I can defeat him alone any more than Millennium's whelps could defeat me. Can none of the other first be awakened? I'm afraid not, acknowledged Puck. The old wolf's slumber is the only thing that grants his children the self-control they need to live among the humans. I tried reaching the city, but I can't even scry Arcadia right now. Either they all committed suicide like they threatened to, or the mists around the realm eternal are just particularly strong. Gilgamesh is still a stone statue and I don't know when or if he'll ever decide to rejoin us. That just leaves you and me. Puck removed the pieces of his cigar. Alucard, we have to try. I inflicted our problem on their world out of ignorance, and it will consume them if we let it. I've been eavesdropping on them. They don't even seem to remember sealing Morphean away anymore. It happened so long ago for them that they're unaware of the danger. Puck took a serious look at the tall vampire. If you could hold the gate to that world open, I'd walk through it and try to help them, but vampires can't manipulate the eternal road, so you have to be the one to go. The bloodline of the clan in that world who sealed Morphean away is fading, the dwarf went on, but the others like them should be able to help you. That world's mages call themselves ninja. If you recall, they fought against and destroyed Morphean's spawn the last time he threatened their villages. Alucard shook his head, but Puck could see the answer in his eyes. What were they called, again? Alucard asked. The family of mortals that sealed Morphean away, I mean, as Puck waved his hands, and the rainy hill in England gave way to a broad cobblestone walkway that wound through an endless void. Stars danced slowly around them as Puck and Alucard walked the eternal road. What was their name? Puck frowned as he raised his hand, and a doorway appeared on the edge of the eternal road. Ah yes, Uchiha. They were called the Uchiha clan. They were the only ones with the power over space/time necessary to freeze Morphean like that, so you're going to have to find a different solution this time, he said, his eyes brightening. Alucard groaned and murmured, all right then, wish me luck, before disappearing through the doorway. As one of her men drove the Hellsing siblings' limousine, Seras Victoria jolted in her seat as she sensed a change in herself. Goodbye, police girl, Alucard's voice murmured in her heart, and their relationship vanished like a morning mist in the sun. Ma'am, are you all right? The driver asked, noticing his commander's abrupt movement, looking at Seras and being shocked to find a single scarlet tear of blood on her cheek. Yes, it's nothing, keep your eye on the road, Seras said after wiping the blood drop away after blinking. Yes, ma'am. Seras sat in silence, perplexed. She had sensed her previous master's increasing yearning to go back to sleep, but this time it felt more like he had simply disappeared. The Fourth Shinobi World War was over. As Naruto Uzumaki, panting and trembling, stood over the battered form of Madara Uchiha, clouds roiled overhead and thunder rumbled. The pink-haired Kunoichi Sakura Haruno applied her healing arts to the prone form of Kakashi Hatake, trying to prevent him from bleeding out from a variety of injuries, including an empty, bleeding eye socket where his Sharingan had once rested. Gaara Sabaku, Kazekage of the Hidden Sand, stood next to Naruto, his face paler than usual, his left arm ending in a cauterized stump at the elbow, vaporized by one of Madara's attacks. Miles away, Sasuke Uchiha and Killer Bee lay dead on the battlefield alongside thousands of shinobi, samurai, resurrected warriors from ancient times, and innumerable clones of the strange Akatsuki known as Zetsu. It's over, Naruto told Madara, his eyes blazing with the power of the Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox imprisoned in his soul. It was frightening how close Madara had come to his insane dream of enslaving the world. In the final battle, he had defeated Killer Bee, the host of the eight-tailed beast, but despite all Madara's efforts, Naruto and his allies had finally defeated him. The world has united against you and won, Naruto added. You may have one boy, but you will never know peace. You don't know what you've unleashed today, but you'll find out soon. I am the last of the Uchiha, and the only one who remembers the curse. You will regret this day. Remember that I offered you paradise when your world becomes a living hell. Madara said with a harsh laugh and blood streaming from his lips. Murata's body trembled as Naruto relaxed, shredding his coat and uniform from the inside out. Silver light burst from his chest, and Naruto watched as a seal carved into his chest vanished in an instant. The silver light formed a huge bat that leaped into the air before taking flight and flying at a tremendously high speed to the southwest. "What was that?" screamed Sakura. As the adrenaline from the battle wore off, Sakura finished stabilizing Kakashi and went over to tend to Gaara's wounds. Naruto looked to the southwest, where the silver bat had vanished from view, troubled by Madara's menacing last words. "I don't know," he replied, looking at Gaara, who shook his head, also clueless. The Kazekage then flinched and fell to his knees, shocked by the loss of his arm. Alucard looked around to regain his bearings as the disorientation from leaving the Eternal Road subsided. The woodland was sunny and lovely, and the vampire frowned as he sought out the tree's shade. To the east, he could see ferocious storm clouds. Alucard blinked when he realized that his guns were gone along with his beloved coat, suit, and fedora. "Right," he muttered grimly, forgot about the prohibitions of the Eternal Road, which stated that no one was permitted to bring goods from a more developed world into a less developed one unless they were present there as well. His manufactured clothing and large handguns would remain in limbo on the Eternal Road until he returned. Alucard's old attire was replaced by the uniform he had purchased to blend in during his previous visit to this world to check on Morpheon's prison. His attire included round dark glasses, a hooded red cloak that hung down to his ankles, and an open crimson flak jacket over a long-sleeved black shirt and pants. His boots, at least, were largely identical, though the leather was hand-stitched and the metal in the soles was forged. It was similar to the clothing worn by the local magic users, or ninja, and served as a warning that he was not to be taken lightly. The only aspect of a ninja's attire that Alucard had foregone was the armored headband that indicated one's loyalty to a particular ninja village. The last time Alucard visited that forest village of ninja, he leaped up into the trees. He didn't want to get there before nightfall because, according to his memory, ninja were hostile to uninvited guests and quite perceptive for mortals. He wanted to wait until nightfall before sneaking into their village to see what had changed since his last visit. What was its name? Yes, the natives dubbed it the village hidden in the leaves, Alucard thought to himself, Konoha. There was a wooded valley tucked away in the mountains to the far south of the Land of Fire. The elevation and constant precipitation caused the valley to be covered in fog nearly all the time. Few people lived or farmed there, and it was regarded as a haunted and cursed place in the local superstitions of the surrounding villages. One of the few settlements in the region was an ancient shrine that overlooked the fog-shrouded valley. It had been given the foreboding name of Deathwatch Temple, and the monks and priests who lived there were a solemn and forbidding lot. On the grounds of their temple and in the valley below they grew a number of rare herbs, spices and mushrooms that needed the cold, damp air to thrive. They did a brisk trade with shinobi and merchants alike, their main connection to the outside world. They rarely spoke of their mission, though they had never forgotten it, as the rest of the world had. Passed down from one generation of priests to the next was the truth of their vigil. Their task was to watch over the valley, and ensure that if the great evil sealed away so long ago was ever to return, the ninja villages and ruling daimyo would have warning. In their scrolls and tomes was recorded the truth of the distant past, the rise of the dead who walked and the immortal monster who commanded them, sealed away so long ago. After so many generations few of the men who served the Deathwatch Temple believed the great evil would ever return, but they kept their vows and kept watch. Tuzen Akira, high priest of the Deathwatch Order, walked the upper balcony of the shrine, enjoying the fading rays of the evening sun. He had almost completed his stroll when a flash of silver light from the north caught his eye. Frowning, he turned to watch a streak of silver light arc over the mountains with incredible speed. The old priest's eyes widened in shock as the light plunged down and struck the ground far below the temple. The whole valley was bathed in silver light, and a powerful wind sprang from nowhere to disperse the lingering fog. In the blood-red light of the setting sun, Akira, the 59th High Priest of Deathwatch Temple, witnessed the reversal of the event described in the temple's oldest scrolls. The silver light coalesced around a spot halfway down the valley, covering the ground from the river's edge up into the hills. Then the pool of light began to rise into the air, defining as it did so hundreds of buildings. Most collapsed or heavily damaged by a fierce battle. When the light faded, there was an entire village in the valley below. As the sun sank below the horizon, Akira's eyes detected shadows moving in the phantom village below. Shaking off his fear, he entered the temple. "The village hidden in the grave has returned," he said numbly. The bells of the temple started to peal as the other watchers noticed the return of the ancient horror. The time had come for the Deathwatch to leave their ancestral home. Messengers had to be sent to every corner of the elemental nations. The daimyo and the shinobi had to be warned. There was a dense grove of old trees outside of Konoha. The forest was primordial. It had never seen a farmer's plow or a woodsman's axe. The trees had stood for centuries. In the center of the grove, hidden by dense brush, was a tree that was different from the others. Its twisted limbs clawed at the sky like talons, its bark was as black as midnight, and its leaves were blood-red despite the surrounding trees being green. The tree shivered as if in a fierce wind, but the air was still as the sun sank below the horizon, causing the earth beneath its roots to stir and move. A fist emerged from the ground, followed by an arm and a body. The once buried thing in the shape of a man stood, shaking the dirt and debris of ages off of himself. He wore armor of a style that had been abandoned by shinobi centuries earlier in favor of lighter, more flexible body protection. His lank, stringy black hair hung straight to his shoulders, and he wore a hitaite adorned with a mirrored pair of inverted teardrops. His jaw opened, and his cracked gray tongue ran over yellow teeth, including a pair of wicked fangs in place of his incisors, which served as the inspiration for the design on his brow. The recent escapee from his forest grave knew that he would have to report back to his village now that it had emerged from limbo, but first he needed to hunt. He came to rest on a tree branch, his head turning abruptly to the side as his withered nose caught a delicious scent. He initially moved jerkily, his tendons creaking after centuries of slumber, but as he lumbered through the moonlit forest, he acquired a sort of deathly grace, and soon he took to the trees. He sniffed the air, searching the winds for scents. Hunger bit him, burning in his mind even stronger than the call of his master. 4 people entered a small clearing in the Konoha forest within seconds of one another, with sandals and whispers of cloth hitting tree limbs. A tall, thin man whose body was mostly hidden by a long hooded jacket and dark glasses stood on a tree branch above them. He was accompanied by a large, shaggy white dog. The woman was slender and beautiful, with purple hair and pale eyes without pupils. "I thought this whole alliance of the villages to fight the Akatsuki would bring peace, at least for a little while," murmured Hinata Hyuga, the purple-haired woman, with a sigh as she nodded to the other 2 jounin. "It seems that temporary alliance against a man who wanted to end the world doesn't change the fact that trust has never been the shinobi way," Shino Aburame noted quietly from his perch. "Temporary is right," Kiba Inazuka growled, his canine companion Akamaru barking his agreement. "Madara's body isn't even cold yet and already the other villages are testing our borders." A decade earlier Konoha had been the largest and strongest of the hidden villages, but the attack of sound and sand, the devastation wrought by pain of the Akatsuki, and the heavy casualties suffered in the recently concluded Fourth Shinobi World War had left Konoha dangerously vulnerable. The bulk of their forces were still returning to the Land of Fire, and the former members of Team 8 had been among the uninjured shinobi teams ordered to return to Konoha at top speed to shore up the village's depleted defenses. What they found was discouraging. Foreign shinobi from Rock and Cloud were in the Land of Fire, taking advantage of Konoha's skeleton force of defenders to scout far closer to the village than they would have been allowed to in peacetime. Hinata, Kiba and Shino had been busy since their return chasing off those encroaching scouts and slowly reclaiming the forests around Konoha. The moon and the sky above them bathed the clearing in light. What is it? More cloud morons? Kiba observed the expression on Hinata's face as the buzz of Shino's Kikai bugs changed in pitch and the bulging veins and arteries surrounding her eyes announced her usage of the Byakugan. Hinata pointed to the west and exclaimed, "One shinobi by himself headed right for us. He's wearing a full suit of old-style armor, like Choji's," she continued. Kiba cracked his knuckles and remarked, "Coming right for us? Oh good, I'm tired of these cowards who just run away." "Something's off," Shino said. "The Kikai don't know what to make of him, no chakra, no pulse. That can't be right." Hinata gasped as he entered the silver moonlight. Kiba's nose twisted, and the three of them went into combat stances as the newcomer, a gray-skinned corpse-like creature in crimson armor, descended from the woods into the clearing. Shino, the first to recover from the shock of the new arrival's appearance, asked, "That mark on his Hitai 8, do either of you recognize it?" His comrades shook their heads. "He looks like a corpse," Hinata exclaimed, startled. Kiba remarked, "Smells like one, too, long dead," as his fingers grew into claws. He flexed his hands and his fingers grew longer, tipped with evil claws. "I am Fun, child of Morpheon," the corpse-like figure hissed in a voice so dry and archaically accented that they had difficulty understanding it. His long, bladed finger pointed to each of the three in turn. "What clan are you, shinobi?" the gaunt, gray figure asked, laughing with a dry, hissing sound coming from withered lips. Kiba dropped to his knees and growled, "Fun, huh? Well, wherever you're from, you're not welcome here. This is Konoha's territory. Leave now," Kiba said. "Konoha clan?" Fun growled, pausing, his head twisting slightly, a horrifying smile spreading across his parched face. "I do not know this clan, unimportant, your blood will serve," he said, before lunging at Hinata with his claws out. As a pair of horizontal tornadoes flew through the area where he had been standing, the Hyuga Jounin's eyes narrowed and she ducked under his first clawed strike, batting away the second. Hissing in frustration, he whirled, almost blurring with inhuman speed, and his knee struck Hinata's stomach hard, throwing her back. He then went at her with his claws once more before leaping away with a snarl as Kiba and Akamaru jumped to Hinata's defense. His path was blocked once more, this time by a dense cloud of insects that surrounded him, biting and stinging. Fun laughed again and then filled his lungs until his chest swelled, and when he exhaled, it was a noxious green cloud. The Kikai bugs dropped as soon as the gas hit them, and Shino called back the ones who were far enough away to survive. Fun dodged their attacks with more of his startling speed, snorting in contempt as he eluded the dog ninja, returning to Hinata as she stood up with a painful wince. He was good, very fast, and had no visible chakra for her Byakugan to trace, making it difficult to predict his moves and impossible to use Juken strikes. Shino had given Hinata enough time to prepare, but she was better prepared for Fun's speed and was able to hold him off, deflecting his attacks with smooth, economical motions. It was difficult, harder than sparring with another shinobi. The corpse-like warrior grinned as he dodged Kiba and Akamaru's attacks and reached into the whirlwinds to grab them. Still in the whirlwind of their dual technique, they came barreling in from either side to crush Fun. Heedless of their chakra tore at his dry flesh and shredded his armor. Fun threw Kiba and Akamaru directly at Hinata, whose eyes widened in alarm. They managed to stop their spin and avoid tearing her to pieces, but they were unable to stop their momentum. Dog and man struck Hinata with bone-breaking force, and the three fell in a heap. Shino barely had time to draw a kunai before Fun blurred and was on top of him. He formed an insect clone from his surviving Kikai bugs, but he wasn't the melee fighter that Hinata and Kiba were, and it took only seconds for one of Fun's blurring strikes to get through his guard, claws slicing through cloth and armor to rake across his chest. The bug ninja cried out in pain and then his voice was choked off as Fun grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the tree trunk. The Kikai swarmed Fun, but he exhaled more of the poison gas to drive them off. As Shino watched, lungs burning, Fun licked the blood from the tips of his fingers where he had scored Shino. The desiccated warrior made a face. The insects pollute your blood, it is inedible, a pity. Before Shino could react he was airborne, thrown with incredible force by the suddenly disinterested Fun. He slammed into another tree, the back of his head bounced off the bark, and he fell to the ground in a boneless heap, out cold. Fun leaped down to where Hinata and Kiba were struggling to get up, hurt and in pain. He kicked Akamaru hard enough to send the ninja dog sailing into the trees, and Kiba got up into a crouch before Fun's fist hit his jaw and knocked him out cold. He dragged Hinata to her feet and pinned her against the tree, and she drove a knee into his groin with all of her strength, but the impact didn't seem to hurt Fun. He tightened his grip on her broken arm until the bones ground together and she screamed, but her cry was cut short when his jaws stretched wide and his long fangs sank into her neck. The harsh sounds as blood poured from her neck and Fun drank it filled her ears. It can't end like this, Hinata thought desperately, the silver moon above filling her eyes. When Fun released her, Hinata collapsed to the ground with her back against a tree. She blinked slowly in surprise at the transformation of Fun, who no longer appeared to be a corpse. His skin had become healthier and he was no longer thin or gaunt. In fact, he was filling out the armor he was wearing. His eyes were dark and filled with a cruel light, blackness eating away at the edges of her vision. All she could do was watch as he grabbed Kiba and sunk his fangs into the dog ninja's neck, starting to drain his blood as well. Hinata fell into unconsciousness almost gratefully, her final thought that she didn't want to watch her friend die. Fun dropped the dog ninja, wiping blood from his lips and grinning with joy, until he was as exhausted and pallid as his dear companion, his heart fluttering as feebly as hers. His body blazed with fresh vitality, full of life power taken from the young shinobi. All human blood was nutritious and enjoyable to vampires, but shinobi were unique. Their blood tasted better and was more powerful than that of ordinary humans. Fun, who was once a shinobi, still views himself as such, but any vampire from the village hidden in the grave, where their creator and master Morphean lived, preferred to hunt living shinobi. It didn't really matter if they rose as ghouls. If either was a virgin, they'd become vampires, and Fun didn't feel like waiting to find out and possibly having to drag a bewildered offspring halfway across the continent. "Guess I'd better decapitate them," he said to himself, eyeing the pair he'd drunk from. His voice had changed from a hiss to a bass rumble. In a terse male voice behind him, "I'd say you've done enough damage tonight." Well, Fun was not a hatchling, but he had spent the majority of his life in slumber, so he was still weak. This vampire in front of him was an elder. He wasn't as strong as Morphean, but he was close. Fun spun, muttering a startled oath and wondering how the hell someone had gotten the drop on him. What he saw woke up a spike of fear. Fun wouldn't have been able to avoid the wave of blackness, eyes, and teeth that poured out of Alucard's sleeve and bore down on him like a wave if he hadn't just eaten from a pair of shinobi. As it was, he lost his left foot to snapping jaws, but he managed to jump out of range. Flush with blood, Fun quickly regenerated his foot and continued running. For a brief moment, he was afraid the older vampire would follow and kill him, but fortunately, the older undead didn't follow. Morpheus would want to know about this new player on the field, so fed and reinforced, Fun raced south toward the lighthouse in his head that was his master. "Are you Umbu?" Shino asked as he staggered over to Hinata and Kiba, who were sprawled on the ground, with a tall man in a red hooded cloak hovering over them, inspecting the puncture wounds on their necks. Shino woke up with a groan, a splitting headache, ringing ears, and some nasty bruises forming. Despite the pain, he pushed through the dizziness and slowly stood up, looking around for his teammates. "Impressive, most mortals don't recover from a hit like that so quickly, ninja really are impressive," the man said, straightening surprised and letting his hood slip back to reveal his own dark glasses and long black hair. "I don't know any, Umbu, my name is Alucard," he said, shaking his head in response. "Not Anbu, a stranger," Shino groaned. Thinking, he sent some of his last Kikai bugs flying toward Konoha and the reinforcements nearby. When he was finished, Shino looked around and inquired, "Where's the shinobi who attacked us?" Alucard said, "That whelp ran before I could kill him," giving Kiba and Hinata a quick glance before turning back to Shino. "These are your comrades," he said. Shino turned to face Hinata and Kiba, who were pallid and breathing shallowly. "Yes, they're my friends. Can you help me carry them?" "Our village isn't far," Shino said. Saying, "Your village can't help them, boy, they've both been bitten, they're dead already," Alucard shook his head. Alucard interrupted Shino's attempt to take up Hinata as his eyes narrowed. "They're still alive. We have skilled healers, I know they can be saved, I need to get them to the village," Shino said. "I understand you want to help them, but they can't be helped by your arts, you don't understand what a vampire's bite will do to them. Do you shinobi really not remember the last time you faced the living dead?" Even if Fun had been a vampire, he still needed to get his teammates medical attention. "Look, can you please just help me get them to our village?" Shino asked, not believing Alucard a day earlier, but he didn't know what else to call the thing that attacked them, and the wounds on Hinata and Kiba and their lack of blood seemed to lend credence to the idea. "They mean a lot to you," Alucard said, glancing at Shino. "Are they virgins?" he asked after receiving a passionate nod from Shino. Shino's mouth sprang open. "What? I may be able to help them, but I need to know, are they virgins?" the vampire hissed as Alucard pulled off his spectacles and his crimson eyes burned. "How could that be related to anything?" Shino blinked. "I don't know about Kiba, he talks a big game, but I've never seen him with a girl," he replied, looking at the deathly pale woman. "How does knowing that help them?" he asked. Shino screamed as Alucard's jaw opened to expose fangs similar to Fun's. He then bared his wrist and bit it, causing black blood to fall from the cut. "If they're virgins, this will help them, if not, they're doomed," Shino said. Shino grabbed a kunai from his pouch and said, "You're one of them." Alucard disregarded him and held his bleeding wrist over Hinata's mouth, causing drops of blood to fall between her lips. "Get away from her!" Shino yelled as he ran at Alucard with the kunai. An apparition resembling a many-eyed dog emerged from the vampire's body, growling at him as a black cloud of eyes and teeth poured out from beneath Alucard's cloak. "Calm down, boy, if I wanted to hurt you or your friends you'd all be dead. If you care about them, then I'm the only one who can help them," Shino said, leaping back with a curse. Without lowering his kunai, Shino demanded, "What are you doing to them? If they're not virgins, they'll soon rise as mindless ghouls, and destroying them will be the only mercy anyone can offer," Alucard said, letting a little more of his blood trickle into Hinata's mouth before turning to Kiba. "If they are virgins, however, then I'm saving them from slavery worse than death by making sure that they will belong to my bloodline and not Morpheans." Shino's pupils widened. "The one who attacked us, Fun, said he was the child of Morphean. How do you know that name?" "I was sent here to help you ninja deal with Morphean, and you're going to need me," Alucard groaned. Kiba withdrew after swallowing enough of his blood, and the gash in his arm closed on its own. A few moments later, half a dozen shinobi wearing hooded white cloaks and animal masks flew out of the trees, and Alucard found himself surrounded by three of them, three kunai blades pressed to his neck as the other three spirited Kiba and Hinata away and checked on Shino. "That's great, but I'm taking them to our village now," Shino said more firmly, his scouting bug sensing familiar arrivals. The shortest of the three, a lady wearing a weasel mask and a seductive voice, stated, "You'll be coming with us too, stranger." Alucard smiled toothily and said, "Looks like I am. Is your name Umbu?" He laughed when he was met with silence, and he didn't fight back when the Anbu shinobi grabbed his arms behind his back and bound his wrists, rushing him into the woods toward their settlement. Well, so much for subtlety, Alucard thought, as he could feel his two new children moving away and being transported more quickly than he was. "Separating me from those two is not wise," he said, feeling compelled to warn the shinobi. Even if they weren't likely to listen, they will lack the self-control to avoid harming others when they wake to their first hunger. The small woman growled, "Shut up and walk before I bleed you, freak," and all he received in return was a kunai jab in the back that was strong enough to draw blood. Alucard laughed, licking his lips and said, "Promise?" One of the taller Anbu nudged him, and he shook his head, saying, "I tried." A well-dressed blonde woman in green looked through the window of a jail cell door in Konoha's underground prison. She stared for a while, her face showing a look of incredulity, before glaring at one of the Anbu standing on either side of the door. When she saw Alucard lounging in a cozy-looking tall-back chair with a glass of ruby liquid in his hand, she became enraged and yelled, "Explain to me why this prisoner is not restrained, and where the hell he got the armchair and the wine." His crimson flak jacket and black clothing gave him the appearance of a dark reflection of a leaf shinobi. The Anbu shared a frantic gaze. "We've tried, Tsunade-sama, everything from ropes and chains to seals and binding jutsu, he just slips out of them like he's made of smoke. We have no idea where he's been getting the drinks and furniture, we've tried removing them, but they just reappear." Tsunade turned and looked at Marino Ibiki's scarred face, ignoring the terrifying implications of a prisoner who could summon things through 5 levels of barriers and ignore binding jutsus. "What have you gotten out of him?" she asked. Ibiki appeared even more glum. "He says his name is Alucard, and he has freely shared information about himself, the nature of the threat this Morphean poses, and his version of what happened to the Hyuga girl and the Inuzuka boy. His story about being a vampire is ludicrous, but I can't explain his abilities either. There isn't a bit of chakra in him, but he's slipperier than Orochimaru and we can't quantify his abilities. He wears ninja garb, but we've never encountered jutsu like his, and he insists it's not jutsu at all, but his power as a vampire." Ibiki breathed a sigh of relief and patted, "He's been very consistent about what he's offered, and we haven't gotten anything else out of him, he won't tell us where he's from or who he works for, he just laughed when we tried torturing information out of him and regenerated as fast as we hurt him. Aoba screamed for half an hour and is now in a coma after trying to enter his mind, and I'm not sending another mental ninjutsu specialist into his head until I have a better handle on how he's resisting them. Tsunade inquired, what about Shino Aburame? Still being debriefed by my people and going out of his mind worrying about his teammates, his story doesn't contradict Alucard's, but he was unconscious for part of the fight, and he confirmed that this guy tried to stop him from bringing Hinata and Kiba back to the village. He told Shino that we couldn't help them. For all we know, Alucard here could be this Fan guy who attacked them using a disguising ability. It's convenient that he drove off the other vampire when no one was looking. Sighing, as outlandish as his claim to be a vampire is, I'm inclined to believe it simply because I don't have another explanation for why Kiba and Hinata are still alive, she explained to Ibiki's delight. Neither of them is breathing or has a pulse and there's no chakra in them, but they're awake and coherent, which they shouldn't be since they're both clinically dead. There's no jutsu that could do this, even Orochimaru's reincarnation ability requires chakra. Whatever's keeping those two alive now, it's not something I can quantify. Looking at the prisoners, open it up, I need to talk to him. Tsunade-sama one of the masked ANBUs started, but was interrupted when her punch left a crater in the concrete wall next to his head. She said, open the door, with a false sense of tenderness. When the room's door opened and a stunning blonde with a huge bust entered, Alucard looked up from his reflection. Ah, a new visitor, how can I help you? She asked, slapping the full cup out of his hand and throwing it against the wall with such force that she broke a couple of his fingers just for good measure. So this isn't a social call, I take it, he said. Tsunade asked, what did you do to my people, with a phony, lethal smile? Are we talking about the dog boy and the purple-haired girl, or the fellow who entered my mind? Alucard asked, putting one long finger on his temple. If it's the latter, he'll recover in a few days, and in my defense I did warn him repeatedly that he wouldn't like what he found in here, he said with a slow shrug. Kiba and Hinata, what did you do to them? Tsunade snarled and snatched a hold of Alucard's jacket, dragging him partially from his chair. Alucard grinned with a toothy grin, his eyes filled with untamed light. I saved those two young ninja from eternal slavery to a monster far older and meaner than myself. They were doomed to become vampires from the moment their attacker drained them. I gave them my blood to make them my children instead of Morphians. An act of mercy for which you should be thanking me profusely if you care as much about them as your demeanor indicates. You're asking us to take an awful lot on faith. Tell me where you're from, Tsunade said, releasing his jacket with a disgusted expression. I have declined to answer that question because the answer would have no meaning to you, Alucard said, straightening his jacket with a wry smile. He stood up in a single, sinuous move, his eyes darkly glowing as he gazed at Tsunade. The door opened, and the ANBU entered to support her cautiously. The answer you and your cohorts want is that I'm from another hidden village, seeking to gain some petty advantage in your never-ending game of thrust and parry with the other happy little mercenary tribes of this world, Alucard said with a look of rage in his tone. I am here because your ceaseless conflicts have resurrected an evil that was safely sealed away and forced me to come here to clean up the mess you just created. Tell me, did you even understand what you were doing when you killed the last of the Uchiha clan and broke the seal on Morphian's prison? I'm the one asking the questions here, Tsunade moaned, remembering Naruto and Sakura's account of the unidentified seal cut into Uchiha Madara's body, the one that had vanished with his passing. Tsunade was about to respond when Alucard paused, his eyes appearing to stare through a blank patch of wall 5 floors up and half a kilometer away. No more questions, Alucard said calmly, because I didn't have anything better to do tonight. I've tolerated your games and your disregard of my warnings because I told your comrades that it was dangerous to separate me from the fledglings when they are so newly turned, and now some of your people are going to die for your paranoia unless I go save them, again. Alucard ended the scathing tirade by removing his red cloak from his chair and slipping it over his shoulders. Tsunade cautioned, "You're not leaving this room." Before they could respond, Tsunade, Ibiki, and the ANBU guards were swallowed by a wave of blackness that flowed from beneath Alucard's cloak as he replied, "Try and stop me," with a bare-fanged smile. The whole situation was extremely strange. Hinata Hyuga, who was sitting on the edge of a hospital bed wearing a patient's gown, and Kiba, who was sitting on the bed next to her, had been brought in with no heartbeat and the core body temperatures of corpses. However, before Ino could even begin to figure out what caused her friends' deaths, they both woke up and began to move around, so the ANBU that brought them in called reinforcements. 2 of them were in the examination room, and 4 more were outside. Ino's initial suspicion was that Hinata and Kiba had been the victims of Orochimaru's resurrection jutsu, but that theory was quickly disproved. The victims of the resurrection jutsu still had chakra, but their bodies were devoid of it, much like the corpses they medically resembled, except that they weren't dead. Still no luck turning it off? Ino asked, glancing at Hinata's eyes. The veins surrounding her eyes were bulging, which is normal when her Byakugan is activated, and they have been that way ever since she was brought in. "No, I can still see everything," Hinata said, shaking her head. Her Byakugan had been stuck on since she woke up for some reason. The purple-haired Kunoichi put a hand to her stomach and looked slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry to ask Ino, but could we have something to eat if this is going to go much longer?" she said. "I'm starving too, and where's Akamaru?" Kiba asked with a growl of agreement. "Akamaru has some broken ribs, Kiba. Your sister Hana is taking care of him and you should be able to see him soon," Ino said, nodding as he looked at an ANBU member who had knocked on the door and given word for some food to be delivered. Hinata questioned, "So what's wrong with us?" Ino had been hearing unsettling things from the ANBU regarding Shino's debriefing and the mystery prisoner that the Hokage was questioning. "I'm not sure yet," she told Hinata. "I'd like to get Tsunade-sama's opinion," she said, pausing as she struggled to find the right words. "I have no idea," she confessed to herself, but she was unable to tell Hinata that. When Hinata nodded and licked her lips nervously, Ino noticed something strange. "Open your mouth, will you?" Ino frowned as she looked at her fellow Kunoichi's incisors, which appeared longer than she remembered and nearly as long as Kiba's. Ignoring his frown, she walked over to Kiba and checked the dog ninja's teeth, noting that Kiba's incisors, which had already been elongated due to his Inuzuka blood, now had fangs menacing enough to make a snake proud. Ino picked up a pair of medical calipers and took a measurement, noting it. She wasn't sure what it meant, but Tsunade would want to know. On her way back to Hinata, Ino was measuring her teeth when her fingers slipped as she was adjusting the calipers. Her finger struck Hinata's razor-sharp incisor, slicing her skin and causing blood to pool from the wound. The purple-haired woman's pale Hyuga eyes turned red in an instant, and Ino barely managed to snatch her hand away before Hinata's teeth snapped shut where her fingers had been. Ino blurred into motion, faster than Ino had ever seen the other woman move, and she was tackled to the floor. The medical ninja's wide eyes noticed that Hinata's teeth had gotten even longer, and then her arm was against her throat, warding her off as the other Kunoichi lunged and attempted to bite her again. Only Warhone ninja reflexes saved Ino from what happened next. After a moment of shock, the 2 ANBU in the room sprang into action, grabbing Hinata and dragging her away from Ino. Then, with a startled yell, one of the two fell to the ground as Kiba charged at him, his own eyes red and his teeth tearing into a log. Kiba bit deep into the ANBU's neck and blinked as his teeth tore into the log. The ANBU then appeared behind Kiba and grabbed him from behind. The dog ninja snarled and threw himself backward, slamming the ANBU between his body and the wall. Meanwhile, Hinata attacked the other ANBU, who hissed in pain as Hinata's fingers, suddenly tipped by surprisingly sharp claws, tore through the tough material of his jacket and raked his torso, drawing blood that only seemed to aggravate the red-eyed Hyuga. The door flew open as Ino leaped to her feet, and the 4 ANBU outside hurried in with their weapons drawn. The scene appeared to be about to degenerate into a general melee when a cloud of darkness appeared in the center of the room, spinning and growing until Kunai threw herself at it were deflected harmlessly. The cloud filled the room and then collapsed, and the ANBU stumbled upon seeing Tsunade, Ibiki, and 2 more of their number grouped around the red-cloaked stranger who went by the name Alucard. When the ANBU saw that Alucard, Hinata, and Kiba were in danger, they unleashed a flurry of kunai, shuriken, and offensive ninjutsu at him. Alucard scowled and threw his red cloak at Kiba, which somehow wrapped itself around the dog ninja and deflected the barrage of metal, fire, and lightning that was aimed at him. Alucard was hit by several attacks, but appeared unfazed, grabbing Hinata and putting his body between her and the Asa. In a matter of seconds, his back appeared to be a pincushion of thrown weapons, his body had smoking holes from fire jutsu, and electricity ran up and down his body. One arm was hanging limp, the other had been blown off completely, and his legs were covered in wounds that made it seem impossible that he could still stand. Ino was the first to notice that Alucard's presence had changed Ino and Kiba. Their eyes were still red, but there was something more than hunger behind them now. Both Ino and Tsunade gasped in shock when they saw that Alucard had not only remained upright but had turned to face them with a bloody grin, positioning himself between Hinata and Kiba and the ANBU. As they stared at Alucard, Hinata's hands and teeth were normal again. A small arsenal of kunai and shuriken clattered to the floor around him as they were pushed out of his body. Alucard sighed, "You get one attack for free, do it again and you'll find out what happens when my patience reaches its limit. If you force me to, I will remove the fledglings from this environment before your paranoia and ignorance causes them harm," he said, growling as shadows swirled around his body and regenerated his wounds as his cloak unwrapped itself from Kiba and returned to him. The ANBU stopped, but their weapons were still at the ready, as Tsunade held up a hand with narrowed eyes. "I can't let you take my people from the village," she murmured coolly. "You couldn't stop me," Alucard responded with a toothy grin, "but more to the point, I can't let you harm these two, and even if you don't mean to, you will end up harming them if you don't listen to me. You ninja trained to control and utilize your chakra, vampires are no different. These two need time and instruction to master their vampiric nature or they will remain a threat to themselves and others. I'm the only one who's going to be able to do that. Every other vampire in this world right now is your enemy. Hinata, Kiba, can you understand me?" Tsunade looked away first, staring at the couple behind Alucard as they scowled at one another, sparks nearly flying between them. The others in the room stepped back, intimidated by the powerful presence of the vampire and the Hokage. Both said, "Yes, Hokage-sama. You are not to leave the village without my permission, with or without this man, am I clear?" They said, "Yes, Hokage-sama," once more. "They're my people, not yours," Tsunade grinned at Alucard. Tsunade blinked and sighed as Alucard raised an eyebrow, saying, "I see, who in your village will the fledglings be feeding from, then?" They attacked their allies just now because they need blood to survive without me as their creator to sustain them, as all vampires do, so I ask again, who will be donating their blood to these two? Who will be preventing them from losing control and killing whoever you allow them to bite? Who will teach them to fight without losing control of their instincts, and defend themselves without chakra to fuel the abilities they've practiced their entire lives? Tsunade waited for a response, listening to the ANBU's quiet reports about events prior to their arrival and Ino's assessment of Hinata and Kiba's condition. Kiba queried Alucard in a low voice, "Who are you?" Hinata nodded in agreement, "I feel like I know you, somehow." Kiba and Hinata exchanged wide-eyed looks as Alucard's voice reverberated silently in their minds. "I know you have a lot of questions and you're confused, but I will explain everything to you once your Hokage is convinced I'm not a threat. For now, just know that you've been given a great deal of power and that I can teach you to use it for the good of those you care about. I am Alucard, and I saved you from becoming the slaves of the one who attacked you by making you my children." Kiba and Hinata had spent their entire lives in the world of shinobi, where it was difficult to trust anyone from outside the village. However, they both sensed that this stranger was telling the truth, and they were connected. In addition, the red haze had vanished as soon as he arrived, allowing them to think clearly again, though they were still shaken by the memory of what they had done. The terrible hunger was also lessened. "I'll concede that what you've told us may be true, vampire," Tsunade admitted. "But none of it explains why we should trust you." Alucard awkwardly extended his hands. "I could have left at any time, but I didn't. Your barriers and abilities based on chakra don't affect me. I could take these fledglings far away from you, but I won't because this is their home and they want to protect it. I don't expect you to trust me overnight, but you're not giving me a chance at all. You really do need my help. In the weeks and months ahead you'll have more proof than you ever wanted that vampires are terribly real. They will spread over this land like a plague, and you ninja will be their primary targets. With the exception of the three of us in this room, all of them will be like fun, aggressive, feral, and completely under the sway of Morphean, a monster whose only goal is to wipe out human life. All I ask is for a chance to earn your trust. Then you'll follow my orders?" Tsunade asked after considering that. Smiled, "You do remind me of Integra, but unfortunately I can't swear fealty to you. All of your nations and villages need to hear what I have to say, without being suspicious that I'm serving one faction's interest over another. While I'm in your territory I'll abide by your rules, but I'm not here to participate in your internal conflicts. I'd prefer to see them stop entirely, at least until Morphean and his brood are driven back. Good luck with that. You'll teach these two how to be vampires?" Tsunade remarked, referring to Kiba and Hinata, her lips quivering as she fought a smile. "Of course. All right, first things first, if you're taking care of these two, you get to explain their condition to their families." Tsunade nodded. The Hokage had to suppress a smile once more as he wondered how smug the vampire Alucard would be following his encounter with the Hyuga and the Inuzuka. "You're both eager to visit your families, let's go," Alucard said, turning to his offspring as the ANBU filed out of the room after giving Tsunade a skeptical look for a moment because she had given up that final bit a little too quickly. The blonde medical jounin looked at Tsunade with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "She'll act as my representative when you talk to the clans, otherwise they may be upset enough by Hinata and Kiba's condition to attack you," Tsunade said. "Take Ino with you," she said. "Because Ino is not susceptible to mental suggestion, they'll take her word that this is my will." Alucard nodded, sensing from his children's abrupt fear that this was the reality. "Wear this," he said, reaching out and giving Ino his red cloak. "Why?" Ino asked. Alucard's words reminded Kiba and Hinata of the agonizing hunger they had gone through before he arrived. For the moment I'm sustaining them directly with my own power, but their bodies still hunger, so wear it for their sakes, he said, nodding. A vampire's hunting instincts are based on human scent. The cloak will mask your scent with mine. It will make being near you easier for Kiba and Hinata while they learn to control their instincts, he said. Visualize the entrance to your home, Alucard said softly as he stepped up in front of Hinata and placed his hand on her shoulder. Hinata blinked, nodded, and closed her eyes, conjuring images of the Hyuga compound's gates. The medical ninja and the two fledgling vampires flinched as the cloud of blackness engulfed them, and when it subsided, they vanished. Tsunade sighed and put a palm to her forehead. It was enough of a pain when Minato was doing that. This will be interesting, she said as she made her way to her office. As much as she wanted to go find a bottle of sake, it would have to wait because she had a lot of letters to write, or at least force Shizen to write, to allies and a village council that would be demanding answers. Wonder if the vampire would just bite all of them for me, she thought, but then shook her head. He had stated that he wanted to stay out of village politics, so most likely not. The night grew darker outside the Hyuga compound as a swirling black cloud appeared in front of the gate guards. Even as they drew kunai, the cloud broke apart, exposing 4 people. The gate guards became a little more at ease when they saw Hinata, Kiba, and Ino, but their pale eyes were suspiciously fixed on Alucard, a tall stranger with long black hair wearing a red flak jacket over black clothing. Everyone had been so worried. Rumors have been flying around the village that your team was attacked, cried one of the Hyuga guards as he stepped forward and bowed. Alucard observed with curiosity as Hinata inhaled and changed her demeanor, maintaining her kunoichi grace while projecting a more royal demeanor than she did with her fellow warrior princesses. I am unharmed, she dared to respond. My father will wish to hear my report. Ino is here as the Hokage's representative, and Master Alucard is a guest, both of myself and the Hokage. You will show them the proper respect, Hinata said, scowling as the guards bowed yet cast suspicious glances at her companions. Yes, of course Lady Hinata, our apologies, declared the 2 Hyuga guards, winced. You guys don't need me here for this. I'm going to go home and try to explain all of this to my mother before she decides to come find me herself, Kiba said, self-consciously rubbing the back of his head with a faint smile. Alucard arched an eyebrow at his male offspring. Although he had given the Hokage the impression that he was taking the 3 young shinobi straight to the Hyuga estate, he had instead led them to a deserted rooftop where he sat them down and gave them a primer on vampire life. Kiba, are you certain you don't want to wait and allow us to accompany you? Alucard asked. The Hokage had hinted that their clans would not be pleased to hear of their children's transformation into vampires, and Alucard had fully expected to play the role of diverting parental ire away from his offspring and toward himself. After all, he was far more resilient than they were, if any tense ninja relatives decided to turn violent over the news. Kiba nodded his head. Nah, I understand what you were telling me, and the Inuzuka don't stand on ceremony much. My mom's not going to be happy, but I'll explain it to her and meet up when you're done here. Alucard nodded and watched as the dog ninja leaped onto the rooftops and made his way home. Even though Kiba was far away, he could still feel his presence clearly. Putting aside his worries for the boy, he turned his attention to Hinata, whose anxiety and fear he could sense behind her flawless exterior of regal indifference. In reality, Alucard was more concerned about Hinata than Kiba, as the dog ninja was already much more in touch with his instincts than most people, and appeared unconcerned with aging or the idea of drinking blood to survive. As she gained more knowledge, however, Hinata appeared to be more concerned, and he suspected that this was related to her family and her role as the Hyuga heir. Although Integra had also been surrounded by luxury, Alucard was mainly unconcerned with the wealth on exhibit in the opulent Hyuga compound. He was more interested in the people and the chakra-based traps and tools that he could see and feel. There were many ninja in the compound, many of whom had the same enhanced sensory abilities as his offspring. As they entered the large audience room, Hinata led the way, followed by Ino and Alucard. Hayashi Hyuga was not by himself, as several Hyuga shinobi in battle attire, including Niji Hyuga, waited inside, tense and armed. They looked suspiciously at Alucard, their hands close to their weapons. Before speaking, Hinata bowed to her father and knelt down in front of him. The Hyuga clan leader then used his Byakugan to draw a sharp breath and narrow his eyes. Niji followed suit, his features showing disbelief. "So it's true," Hayashi said heavily, and Hinata winced, realizing that he was seeing the same thing she did when she looked at Kiba or herself, a corpse that was still moving around. "I've been receiving disturbing reports about Konoha ninja turned into the Walking Dead all night. Explain this, Hinata," he said. Hiding behind her emotionless mask, Hinata calmly recounted how the creature known as Fan attacked her while she was on patrol, describing its terrifying strength and speed. Ino added details from Shino's debriefing regarding what transpired in the hospital and after Hinata was incapacitated, and Alucard readily responded to Hayashi's questions regarding vampirism and adamantly refused to talk about his past. "It's awfully convenient that one vampire attacks my daughter, everyone is rendered unconscious, and suddenly another vampire rescues her," Hayashi said, his pale eyes penetrating Alucard as the information exchange came to an end. "Shino's Kikai bugs witnessed what happened while he was unconscious," Ino said. Alucard scared off this Fan before he could kill Hinata or Kiba, and AMBU has confirmed that Shino is not under the effect of any genjutsu or mind control. "I'm sorry, Lord Hyuga, but it's the truth. And the Hokage has decided to permit Alucard to remain in the village and instruct Hinata and Kiba while the threat of these other vampires is investigated." Hayashi sighed. "Even if I accepted that, what you did to Hinata and the Inuzuka boy seems extreme. By your own confession they were still alive, why not help them?" Alucard exhaled. "I've been explaining this to different people all night. You'd like the alternatives a lot less. By the time I arrived Fan had already drained both of them of blood. At that point medical intervention, no matter how sophisticated, cannot prevent the transmission of vampirism. If I had done nothing your daughter would still be a vampire, but one with no mind of her own. Morphian's descendants have no free will, they're capable of some independent thought but are ultimately slaves to his commands. She and Kiba would have been compelled to join the ranks of the enemy you will soon face. With the gift of my blood they retain their own will and minds as free vampires." Alucard bared his teeth to Hayashi in an unfriendly grin. "I could have killed them to prevent them from turning at all. Would that outcome have been preferable to you?" "This much is clear, however, Hinata, you cannot remain my heir. I name Hanabi as heir of the main branch," Hayashi declared, with a grudging nod from Hinata's father. "We are concerned about this development. We do not have enough verified information to be comfortable with a Hyuga becoming a vampire, but what is done, and we will reserve judgment on this development until we know more," the elders of the Hyuga clan whispered to Hayashi. There was a brief period of silence in the room as Alucard sensed Hinata's acceptance and sadness. "I understand, father," she whispered softly. "You will also submit to the caged bird seal," said one of the elders, a bald, crusty old Hyuga behind Hayashi who had been recognized as Tsurumo. Hinata scowled, and Alucard saw the mixed expression on several faces, including Niji's, as he heard that declaration. Alucard was amused and contemptuous at the green X that Niji and a few other Hyugas had emblazoned on their foreheads. "You can try, but it won't work," Alucard stated scornfully. Tsurumo angrily declared, "You have no voice here, outsider, and no understanding of the Hyuga clan." "I understand you better than you think," replied Alucard. "I'm simply telling you that it won't work. Shinobi seals function by interacting with chakra, which vampires don't have. Ask your allies in ANBU how well their seals worked on me." With malice, Tsurumo spit out, "All of this is immaterial," and stood up. "The seal will be applied," he said. "The seal is applied by whom?" The thought of Alucard's voice made Hinata start a little. "He does," she reflected, looking at Tsurumo as he approached her. She didn't try to hide her contempt for the elderly man from her master, and Alucard observed that even Hayashi and a few of the other elders appeared annoyed with Tsurumo. Sensing that Alucard was amused, Hinata said, "Let him do it then." She gave him a quizzical look, but he simply smiled and nodded. Choosing to have faith in her master, she sat motionless while Tsurumo towered over her. "Sealing jutsu, caged bird," he said, pressing his hand to her forehead. As Tsurumo yanked his hand back in alarm, everyone in the room stared. The green glow slowly spread up his arm to his shoulder, and he staggered back, staring at his arm and then at Hinata with anger in his eyes. "What did you do?" he yelled. Hinata had closed her eyes in resignation, but she opened them in surprise when she felt heat wash over her face. Hinata squeaked as a hand landed on her shoulder from behind. It was Alucard, who said to Tsurumo, "I did warn you that seals don't work on vampires," with a fanged grin. Then, just in time, Alucard leaped backwards, carrying both Ino and Hinata with him. Tsurumo's arm suddenly ripped open to the bone in half a dozen places, splattering blood from his mangled limb in all directions. The nearest Hyuga were splattered with blood as the old man flailed around before collapsing, clutching his ruined arm. Shocked silence returned to the room, broken only by the groans of the injured Hyuga. The armed Hyuga, who looked to him for guidance, hesitated, but others who were more personally loyal to the elders drew their weapons, closing in on Alucard and Hinata. Niji was busy trying not to smile as the disgusting old man who had applied the caged bird to him and many of his cousins, and seemed to enjoy triggering it for the slightest offense, bled on the floor. "Hold," Hayashi ordered, a single word that was firm but quiet, and all of the Hyuga in the room obeyed. "Someone tend to Tsurumo before he bleeds out," Ino said, kneeling over the injured man, green chakra glowing from her hands as she applied her healing arts. Two Hyuga servants half carried him out of the room after the bleeding stopped, with Ino bandaging his wounds. "It would appear you spoke truly about the inefficacy of seals on the walking dead," Hayashi said dryly, "but this does leave us at a bit of an impasse, vampire. Our bloodline is our clan's greatest treasure. Hinata is no longer a member of the main branch, she cannot be permitted to join you unsealed," he said. Alucard chuckled, "Is that what this is all about? Vampires cannot produce human offspring, I thought I'd made that clear. The Hokage has chosen to trust you, so for the moment I will take your word for that. If your words should prove false, the Hyuga clan has a very long reach," Hayashi said, squinting his eyes but nodding grudgingly. Alucard smiled and said, "I'm not here to lie to you, your fears are unfounded. While we're exchanging threats, I'll encourage you to ensure that no attempts to harm my progeny originate from your clan. I have a long reach, too." At that moment, a black cloud engulfed Alucard and Hinata, and when it collapsed, they vanished. At the same time, the darkness dropped them outside the Hyuga compound's gates. It was still dark outside, and it began to pour rain while they were inside, but they chose to ignore it. Alucard apologized, saying, maybe there was a way that could have turned out better, ninja girl. Hinata paused and said, Elder Sarumo's arm exploding was unexpected, though, expressing surprise at how quickly her sadness had turned to numbness. Honestly, I was expecting that, because my father is responsible for the entire clan, and they don't understand or trust vampirism, so having a vampire in the main branch is unthinkable, she said. I knew his foolishness would rebound on him, but I didn't realize it would wound him that badly until I saw the backlash forming, Alucard responded. Hinata reassured him, don't worry, half of the clan will be toasting you tonight. That man is an arrogant sadist, she said, pausing despite the rain soaking her, and looking back at the compound gates with a longing expression on her face. I knew this would stop being home one day, I just thought that day would be when I got married, not joined the ranks of the undead. She gave him a faint smile, and Alucard laughed. Alucard's head lifted and he peered into the darkness. You found us quickly, Bug Boy, Hinata said, blinking as Shino emerged from the darkness, protected from the rain by his bulky, hooded jacket. Locating you was simple, responded the bug nin, why? The Kikai bugs can smell corpses, there are no dead bodies littering Konoha, so vampires stand out. I'm so happy you're okay. Ino said you weren't seriously hurt, but after that fight I was worried, Hinata exclaimed joyfully as she rushed to embrace her old partner. To Shino's credit, he didn't bat an eye despite knowing what she had become. Wincing from a backache, Shino rolled his left arm and nodded. I was not badly injured, why? Apparently, vampires do not like insects, he said. You do smell different now, Hinata replied tactfully as she took a step back, not wanting to mention that the fragrance was sickening. She inhaled the air and her nose wrinkled slightly. No vampire would bite you willingly, given your scent I suspect that ingesting your blood would sicken us, are there more like you? Alucard said, nodding while maintaining his distance. The Aburame are a big clan, Hinata said, nodding in response to Shino's raised eyebrow. Oh. Sorry, Shino, she said, her hands flying to her mouth as she noticed the frown on Shino's forehead. Although Hinata had faith in Alucard, she understood that Shino most likely didn't want to share any information about his clan with the vampire. I only asked because those insects could be a potent weapon in the fight that's coming. I don't know how much you were told, but there are more like fun, and the monster who commands them is the reason I'm here. I know no one really trusts me right now, and that's fine, I'm not going to hurt your friends, I'm here to help you. Shrugged, if Hinata and Kiba trust you, then I will trust you, for now, why? Their minds are strong, I do not believe they could be compelled to vouch for you if you were an enemy of Konoha. As he was about to express gratitude, a sharp piece of information that came from the bundle of feelings he had mentally labeled Dog Boy, his progeny Kiba, stabbed him in the mind. He could feel a whirlwind of pain, despair, and fear when he focused on it. The information was muted by distance, but once he focused on it, it became distinct. Alucard growled, causing Hinata and Shino to flinch. Something's wrong, Dog Boy's mind is in turmoil, it has been for a little while, he said, adding with a note of disgust. That mess in there, he waved his hand at the Hyuga compound, distracted me. The expressions of Hinata and Shino became determined. Where is he? Hinata inquired. The tracker bug I left on him will lead me to him, Shino stated. Alucard walked forward, grabbed the duo by the shoulder, and let the darkness to wrap their bodies while trying not to smell the bug ninja. Don't bother, my way is faster, he said. The collapsing cloud of blackness deposited the trio in an alleyway half a kilometer from the Inuzuka clan's home in Konoha. Rain poured down, and there were no lights, so it took them a moment to spot Kiba, slumped against a wall. When a flash of lightning illuminated the alley for a moment, Hinata gasped at the sight and Shino tensed in alarm. Kiba's clothes were in tatters, and he was covered in blood, wounds that looked like bite and claw marks all over his body. When they drew closer, they could see his shoulders shaking, and lines of dark blood running down his cheeks from his eyes. He gripped a bloody kunai in his hand. Lightning flashed again, and they saw deep gouges in his cheeks that came from a blade, not an animal. Hinata's Byakugan picked up the strips of skin lying on the ground, and she flinched, realizing that Kiba had cut the red tattooed clan markings from his own cheeks. Even as she watched, the skin started growing back, regenerating, tattoos and all. The other wounds on his body remained open and bleeding. "They won't come off," Kiba groaned, his voice so empty and broken that Shino and Hinata exchanged a shocked look. Never in his life had they heard Kiba sound like this, not even in the worst moments of the Fourth Shinobi World War. "I keep cutting them off, but they grow back. Why do they keep growing back?" Kiba's voice rose to almost a scream at the end, his dull eyes suddenly focusing on Alucard. Kiba's hand moved, raising the bloody kunai blade to his face again. Hinata grabbed Kiba's wrist and plucked the kunai from his grip. Alucard guided her to the side and crouched over the dog Nin. Shino saw him bite his wrist, and place his bleeding flesh in front of Kiba's mouth. "You're hurt, dog boy, drink, you need to heal." At first Kiba just stared at him, uncaring. "Drink." Alucard barked, and Hinata shivered as she felt the edge of the compulsion that Alucard directed at Kiba brush past her. Kiba's body moved by reflex, his hands gripping Alucard's arm, his mouth latching onto the dripping wound. Shino looked away, uneasy, as Kiba's throat worked, drinking the offered blood. His cheeks healed fully in a matter of moments, and then the vicious wounds on his body started closing, the progress slower. When unmarred flesh peeked through the tears in Kiba's clothes, Alucard extricated his arm from Kiba's grip and healed the gash with a thought. Alucard insisted, "Talk to me, dog boy, what happened?" When Kiba didn't answer immediately, Hinata knelt next to him, ignoring the dirt from the alley that was smearing her clothing. "Kiba, please, tell us what happened to you," she begged. Kiba croaked, Hinata, before glancing to the purple-haired woman and then to the bug Nin across from Alucard. "Shino. You're okay," Kiba said. "We're all right," Shino reassured him. "Who did this to you?" "Kuramaru, the Heimer brothers, even Akamaru," Kiba said in choked gasps, "and they tried to tear me apart, and they kept saying I was evil, wrong, and an abomination. Mom and Hannah barely convinced them to stop, but when they found out what I was, what I've become, Mom kicked me out." She said a dead man had no place in the Inuzuka clan. "But whatever you did to me doesn't know that, because the tattoos keep growing back," he said, running a hand over the fang-shaped red tattoos on his face. Alucard spoke gently, "Those markings are part of you, even if your family disagrees. Vampires don't age, but it's more than that. We're frozen as we were the instant the dark gift was bestowed." With a silent nod, Kiba covered his eyes with his hand as more blood dripped from them and his torso trembled. Hinata gave him a hug while whispering to the distraught dog Nin, "Are all of your shinobi clans like this?" The Hyugas were a hair short of kicking Hinata out the door, too. Alucard asked Shino angrily as he wiped a palm over his face. Shino pondered the issue. "This outcome is extreme. Why? No shinobi clan will trust you or those who have been made like you until given a reason. You are an unknown, and shinobi are cautious by nature, but Sun and Hana love Kiba, and Akamaru was as close to him as a twin brother. There is something else going on here." Coaxing the dog Nin to stand, Hinata said, "Come on Kiba, let's get out of this alleyway." before turning to face Alucard. When Alucard stated, "Let's go reclaim Ino and see where your Hokage is putting us up," the three dejected people nodded and followed him back to the Hyuga property. The barks and snarls of several Ninken woke the Inuzuka compound in the early morning hours as the sun started to taint the eastern sky with light. The human occupants of the home quickly armed themselves and came out in response to the ninja dog's alert. Some saw a tall, red and black figure standing on the road's edge, just past the Inuzuka lands, and several of the Ninken were circling him warily, growling. As Tsum approached, the stranger's scent hit her nose, and she instinctively bared her teeth. "You came to the wrong house, dead man," Tsum growled, gesturing for Kuramaru to join her, her fingers flexing into claws. "I'm exactly where I mean to be," alarmed Alucard. "It's been made abundantly clear to me that Konoha's politics are none of my business. I just wanted to see the cruelest parent I've encountered in several human lifetimes. The Hyuga Lord is a cold man, but his daughter at least left his presence without being maimed or stripped of her name." Tsum said, "You're the one who killed my boy," then, in a gravely chilly tone. "I'm the one who saved him from eternal slavery. Your pets did a decent job of trying to kill him, though." "You saved nothing," Tsum said calmly. "That thing you sent here last night is not my son. A corpse that still moves is not a person. The only thing you ensured is that I don't even have a body to bury or a grave to visit because your curse keeps it walking around." Her voice was tightly controlled with genuine grief. Alucard raised his eyebrows in annoyance. "You know nothing, woman, your cruelty sickens me. Your son's mind is no different than it was a week ago. Vampirism is a transformation, not an ending. To the contrary, we remember everything, you stinking corpse. The Ninken remember when your cursed kind swarmed over this world like a plague. Those who die but yet walk are the enemy of all that lives. Destruction is the only cure for your kind," Kuramaru said next. The giant Nin dog growled a command, and the others surrounding Alucard lunged at him. Tsum was shocked to see resigned understanding in Alucard's red eyes before his form shimmered, the Nin dogs flying through his waning image. "I understand," Alucard replied as his visage faded, "but you should understand that there is more than one kind of vampire. I'm here to hunt the vampires you remember, the enslaved children of Morpheon. Kiba is free of his taint by my actions. For his sake, I hope you come to understand that. Please share the information you have with your Hokage. For the vampires you remember have indeed returned." Tsum's jaw was clenched as she gazed off into space. As Kuramaru rejoined Tsum, he remarked, "Vampires always lie, you can't let him poison you with false hope." Kuramaru stared at the older woman curiously as she ran her hand absently through his fur. "I know," she said gently, "but the dead man was right about one thing. If even one vampire has returned, Tsunade needs to know the secret of our clan's origin," Kuramaru replied. The Inuzuka clan had been formed during that terrible conflict, as ninja used forbidden techniques to bond themselves to the war dogs that were bred to fight the vampires, taking on bestial characteristics and imbuing their canine partners with both human intelligence and a vibrant strain of chakra that inflicted lasting wounds on vampiric flesh. The Inuzuka and their Ninken had been holding on to their memories of the ancient war with the dead for centuries, long before Konoha was founded. By the time Konoha was established, the vampires had been defeated for so long that the Inuzuka saw no need to draw mockery upon themselves by discussing a threat that everyone else had forgotten. However, things had changed, and the Hokage needed to be aware of the existence of a strong and dangerous vampire on the loose in Konoha.